Disciples of the Witness is a concept that today is as common as a Titan needing a res after punching cursed thralls in the face. But 2 years ago, we had never even heard of Disciples. Actually, we never even knew the Witness's name, just that there was a voice in the darkness, a voice in the deep. Disciples entered the game and lore with the arrival of Witch Queen DLC. Before, we thought the worm gods were the highest on the darkness totem pole. And like I said, there were hints of the voice in the darkness, but there was no real concrete definition behind it. With the arrival of Disciples, our understanding of the power structure changed forever. These were the elite champions of the Witness, above the hive gods, above the worm gods, only subject to the Witness itself. Oryx, once thought the greatest of all darkness enemies, seemed smaller in the grand scheme of things, owing his entire existence to the first disciple, Rolk. The worm gods, while still holding some mystery, had less intimidation when we learned that Rolk enslaved them and used their mother as a breeding factory. I will say, I do not think that is necessarily a bad thing, but the change was abrupt and caused longtime Destiny lore fans whiplash. It added another layer to the enemies we face. We have personally fought 3 disciples, Rolk, Nezarec, and Callus, but there are mentions of other disciples or potential disciples. An unnamed disciple in the Book of Inspirial laments for understanding over the final shape. We also know that Savathun was being prepped to be a disciple but rejected it. Contrary to popular belief, Aramis, Oryx, and Ziva Wrath were not being considered to be disciples. Nothing in lore mentions or even implies that they were being groomed to that level with the Witness. The final possible disciple was an insect-like alien named Uin. Rolk created the circumstances that led to Un being the final living thing on his planet. Rolk wanted to create another like himself, someone who rejected family, friends, and culture. The last we heard of Un, he confronted Rolk upon figuring out everything that happened on his planet was the first disciple's doing. We have no idea how that ended up. Rolk did view him as a son and took pride looking upon him, but we do not know if Un survived this encounter. And this is what Rolk says about it. I have failed you, my Witness. I taught the Oslid to build a tower to heaven upon a foundation of sand. I hemmed for 10 long cycles over the final lessons in irrelevance. And in the end, my pupils exceeded my ability as a teacher. They tumbled. A sunset of atomic fire scrubs all the lichen from this arid globe. But Un stands before me, last survivor of his pointless kind, where he proved deaf to the lessons I taught regarding his people's worth. He devoured all I taught him of tenacity and made of it his core. He alone among his people saw the pattern in my killings and the ascension of children whose backgrounds mirrored his own. My duty to you failed. The greatest flaw in my handicraft stands before me, and yet I find myself burdened with pride. He levels a weapon on me, and it occurs that I have never learned what they call their devices. It is as irrelevant as everything else that made up their culture. But he is the first to stand and face me. He dashes hate against me and breaks. He does not know my name. He does not know my purpose. And he demands, then implores, then begs. He prostrates himself on the floor, his carapace racking with convulsions, as if mourning milks the sorrow of his flesh. And I am weak, my Witness, I whisper. I am Rolk. Devoid of context, it is as meaningless as any other aspect of his people's end. Something sacred within him dies, and he gazes up as I have gazed at you. And only now do I appreciate your lesson. But Un isn't the secret disciple I want to talk about today, and I will preface that everything I will be saying from here on out is a theory. I will use story and lore to back it up, but there is nothing in game that says there is a secret disciple. So who is the secret disciple? Well, honestly, if you looked at the thumbnail, it should be kind of obvious. Clarity control. Before we get into my theory, let's go over what clarity control is. First off, clarity control is the breathing, chanting, floating, veiled being in the middle of Deepstone Crypt raid. Yes, if you did not know, this statue is alive. And I'm quoting statue because it's not a statue. Its name is Clarity Control, not Clarity. Clarity Control is not the room you're in the raid. It's literally the giant entity standing before you. Clovis named it Clarity Control because, well, it controls clarity. Clarity is just Clovis's name for the darkness. No one in the Golden Age had ever encountered darkness before. I've had some people on some of my shorts ask me where I got the idea that Clovis called darkness clarity, so I will read the lore where it discusses it. There's a lot of math and equations to this lore, so I'm just going to read the relevant parts. We don't need to be getting into math today. Study of the lunar artifact retrieved from the K1 mission provides insight into the effect I have termed clarity. Clarity violates established symmetries and conservation laws. In doing so, it defies Noether's theorem, the most fundamental and beautiful cornerstone of physics. Symmetry and conservation are two sides of the same coin. All things are transformations of one thing without gain or loss. As my childhood tutor put it, if A can become B, then B can become A. We say that state B, say a mixed drink, comes after state A, say sugar and water, only because there are more probable pathways from A to B. Wait long enough, longer than the universe, and your drink really can return to state A, spontaneously unmixing itself. But clarity is not always symmetrical. For example, it violates time reversibility. This is the application of clarity to state A to produce a lower entropy state B. Clarity is fond of removing portions of state configurations, harrowing the phase space down to only its most robust inhabitants. Time symmetry suggests that we should be able to run this process in reverse and retrieve the original. Clarity's effects cannot be used to return a transformed state to its original state. Instead, we obtain a second transformed state, further yet from the original configuration. What does this actually mean in common language? Invoking. The Lockschmidt paradox is certainly not common language. But perhaps an allusion to. I believe that clarity may be akin to the mythical universal solvent, the alkahest, which ancient alchemists believed had the power to dissolve anything into its pure base elements. Ingested properly, the alkahest could purify the body and grant eternal life. Clarity was just Clovis's word for darkness. Here is where things get a little interesting, though. We do not know what clarity control really looks like. I'm not talking about under the veil, because I know some of you people probably took a little looky look. No judgment here. No judgment. Just saying. If you did it, just tell us in the comments. Don't be ashamed. But what I am talking about is the entity. We do not know what the real form of it is. And here's a quote by Clovis Bray. I wonder why Clarity Control chose this particular aspect it did. That form, that face. The same visage as the precursor on Earth's moon. What is it meant to communicate? It is a message particularly meant for me. Now, Clovis may have been wrong, but in his understanding, Clarity Control purposefully chose to look like the veiled statues. And if you're wondering what the precursor on Earth's moon he is referring to is, it's a PvP map. I mean, it wasn't always a Crucible map, but Clovis is talking about the Crucible map, the Anomaly. This is where Clovis and his K1 scientists first made contact with the darkness, which also means inside that dome is a veiled statue, like we see in the Pyramid Ships and End of Garden of Salvation raid. Now, this is most likely a fun-sized veiled statue inside the containment, because as we all know, a lot of the statues we see are much larger than that box itself. For those of you who have done Deepstone Crypt raid, you may have noticed that the closer you stand to Clarity Control, the more you hear chanting. These whispers can be heard in other places as well, throughout Garden of Salvation raid, the Ziggurat, and when inside the Lunar Pyramid. Now that we've gone over some basics about Clarity Control, we can now get into my theory. Clarity Control is possibly a secret disciple of the Witness. There's not a lot of lore on Clarity Control, but what we do know is it caused a lot of problems for us that we are still dealing with today. While there were Vex on Venus being studied by the Ishtar Collective during the time of Clovis communicating with Clarity Control, there were none on Europa. And that is because Clarity Control is the one who told Clovis to build a Vex gateway. And if you're wondering what gateway that is, it's the giant one that you see at the end of the Glassway Strike, which also on the other side of that gateway is the Vex homeworld, 2082 Voltanus. A gate, of course. Clarity Control is inviting me to make a gate. The messenger hypothesis. Aliens would seek the most efficient method of interstellar contact. Starships are slow, fragile, and massive. It is easier to send a set of instructions for a message receiver or a construction blueprint for a portal. This explains the reports of visions and paranoia at the K1 site. The idiots were receiving a message, but they failed to divine the true purpose. Or perhaps the invitation was only intended for me, and it is an invitation. But I will need more data and more talent to answer it. I feel that the gate Clarity Control wants me to build is not any form or product of Clarity itself. The design, I think, is Vex, those pestilential nuisances encountered on Venus and occasionally elsewhere. If I need a Vex gate to fulfill Clarity Control's purpose, then I will make a Vex gate in the simplest way. I will have a Vex build it for me. And I know exactly where to find one. The only trick will be concealing the fact that I've taken it. And all these words after assert activation is Clovis Bray enacting directives to go attack Ishtar Collective and kidnap one of their Vexes that they are studying. Clarity Control needed Clovis to open the gateway for the Vex to come through so that she could use their radiolarian fluid to make exomines. Everything Clarity did has led Clovis to the point of creating these exomines. The message she was sending through the anomaly on the moon, telling Clovis to come to Europa, was for the purpose of exomines. But why? I believe that this was under the purpose of the Witness. Clarity Control was found buried deep below the surface of Europa, similar to how we found Nezarek's pyramid ship on the moon. Clarity Control had been under Europa for a long time, but we do not know how or when she arrived on the icy moon. We know the darkness had been around the solar system for longer than we ever even knew. Savathun had made contact with humans before even the Traveler arrived on Earth, as told in the Fundament Ghost Shell lore. Gather round, young'uns. No the automat for supper, no noodles. Tonight is something special. Corn, pone, and chitlins. This here's history on the plate. Now don't give me that look before you even taste it. If the world's fixing to end again, it's time you had a meal from our family's past while you hear about it. About how the Rigby clan survived the last time the world went dark. Now the Rigbys, we didn't always squat on the edge of the city. A long time back, we came out of a place that was old, wet, hotter than the fires of perdition. So your grandma's grandma and her pappy before her have said. It was also a place where the devil roamed, giving folk their heart's desire. And I know that last part is true because your ancestor, Sean Rigby was his name, he came to a crossroads one midnight, drunk and filling the fool, and he saw her, standing there, checking the time and looking cool as no other in the sweltering August heath, tall as cottonwood in bloom and wearing a smile across her lips that stopped short of her eyes. Some say the devil is a man with a pointy beard. Others say the devil is a terrifying beast with claws and a tail. But Sean, he knew right then. The devil was a lady. The devil bent down close to him, setting her eyes on his wayward soul. Her voice was honeysuckle sweet as she said, I know you, Sean Rigby. I seen you sweat and sob for a scrap of land, and you can't even rightly say is your own. I seen your family fight to save a name that's more precious to you than gold. Well, there is a reckoning coming, Sean Rigby, one that will wipe all the lands and all the names, high and low, clean from the earth. I alone can whistle up a way to protect one of these things you hold dear, if your family will owe me a debt. Old Sean was already a sinner, but a man with nothing will fight to keep what little he has. He figured that alive and in the devil's pocket was better than dead, so he shook her hand. The devil opened her eyes, 1, 2, 3, and pointed him to the last star in the sky far to the south. She said, That's your star, Sean Rigby. Follow it each night, when it's the last star hanging low, and sing to it. you sing Al Ek Runam Shunam Ek Ur until you call that star down to earth. You do that, and your family will endure. The Rigby's did as they were told and walked south. Each night they sang, and each night their star sat lower and lower, and when it finally fell, they were safe beneath the traveler. But now, children, I give you the same dire warnings that's been handed down to me. The devil hasn't come back yet to claim what's hers, not from Sean or any other Rigby that survived. But a debt's a debt, so you learn and remember that song, children, and steer clear of crossroads once the sun sets. The devil in this lore is Savathun protecting a family if it drew the traveler here with a very particular song. We do not know what the song is. Maybe it's her very own Savathun song, but that is just a cloaking device, so I believe it was something different. It seems more like a chant, an incantation, to draw the traveler and to protect it. We also know that Nezarec was infecting the minds of people long before he unleashed nightmares upon humanity during the collapse. He is that which is an end, and he shall rise again. Passage from Of Hatred Nezarec, a pre-Golden Age text. This shows that people knew about the final god of pain before even there was a Golden Age. How long before is not known, but maybe he was also there before the traveler arrived in the system. So it would not be that far-fetched to think another disciple of the Witness would be close by to those the traveler would bless with a Golden Age. Now, why did the Witness and Clarity Control want exominds being made? Seems weird that they would want humanity to be potentially immortal, right? Not really. The Witness and another disciple have already done this before, with the Hive. Rolk, under the instructions of the Witness, convinced the Hive to ingest worm larvae, thus extending their life and giving them paracausal power. It's not a giant leap to think that the Witness would want to do the same with humanity. And just like the Hive, Exos would end up unknowingly being slaves to the Witness. Exos need two things to survive: Vex radiolarian fluid and darkness energy. So to make a steady supply of both, you would need Clarity Control, meaning that Exos would be subject to staying in the Witness's good graces. Think about what happened with Aramis's people. She failed the Witness, so he turned all her friends into scorn, mindless slaves. Clovis already hated the Traveler, hated the idea an outside being was God when he felt it should be him and his family ruling and protecting humanity. He would easily fall victim to the Witness's desires of fighting the Traveler and destroying it. And with an army of slaves dependent on the supply of darkness and radiolarian fluid that you control, they would quickly fall in line also in a war against the Traveler. Because even though a person's mind is backed up, they still need new exominds every once in a while. Exos suffer from two different medical conditions: DER, which stands for dissociative exomind rejection, and spontaneous reset syndrome. The first is a complete and possibly deadly medical disorder which causes the exomind to violently reject the body. There were even reports of Exos ripping off their own body parts. The other is at any moment an Exo could basically factory reset themselves. On top of these two conditions, an exomind only lasts so long before needing to be reset. Look at Banshee 44. He hasn't been reset in hundreds of years, and we can see in-game how bad it is for him. Memory loss, confusing speech patterns, and more. So an Exo has to be reset and given a new exomind every now and then, thus creating the cycle of slavery needed to be the army the Witness would desire, like the Hive, all under the watchful eye of Clarity Control, a possible disciple. This also mirrors Rolk in another way. He was in charge of creating more Hive worms to produce a steady supply of Hive army for Oryx, Xivu, and Savathun. And we saw this in the Vow of the Disciple raid when we saw the giant mommy worm, Zeta. Without Rolk, new Hive creation would eventually dry out. Same with Clarity Control. Without her supply of darkness to dumb down Vex radiolarian fluid, eventually the supply of exominds would stop. Let's take a look at what the Witness says about the Krill before they become the Hive.
These frail siblings will soon be claimed by the light. Unless we claim them first, we will tell the most cunning sibling of a cataclysm, a prophecy of great loss. We will feed her fear, her pride. We will say, young Sathona, the end is coming. A great cataclysm. A god wave. In the sky, there is only death. But salvation lies in the deep. Lead your sisters down. Your coming will spare their short lives. And you will be reborn, the Witch Queen.
The witness played on Sathona's pride and fear and said that she was the only way to save her people. Clovis Bray is, well known for his pride. So prideful, in fact, he rearranged his son's DNA so that he could remove his wife's lesser genes, as he called it, out of his offspring. He also then gave his son Peyron disease and caused his son's death. But, that's a different story. He also held a lot of fear and anger towards the Traveler and wanted it gone. Clarity Control did tell him only she knew the way for immortality, and the salvation of his people could be found on Europa. Just like the Hive were able to find their supposed salvation deep under the oceans of Fundament. Clarity has all the marks of a disciple. Power over darkness, tricking someone into creating their own enemies with letting the Hive through the portal into Europa, putting into motion the means for someone to create their own slavery bound by darkness. It mirrors Rolk in the Hive almost to a T. So with that, I believe that Clarity Control is a disciple of the Witness. We don't know what she truly looks like, or when or how she arrived on Europa, but we do know her motivations. Create slaves for the Witness. So when you're walking around the tower with your Exo-Titan you made in character creation 8 years ago, take a moment to reflect that your whole purpose at one point in time was to serve the Witness and fight for his goals. And now before I end this video, I wanted to bring up something I find interesting. The Traveler spoke to Clovis. Clovis died for a bit and had a vision. What did I do? I asked her. Why did I do this? She lay her head down in the bloody snow and looked up at me. She seemed wary. She had seen this happen many times before. She had seen many of her pups murdered by wolves like me. The voice of Clovis II's mother came from her jaws. You did the same thing someone always does. You saw that there was plenty and gathered it to yourself to make yourself one above all others. And when others threatened your plenty, you struck them down to keep your own station. You grow the enemy in my garden and eat of its bitter fruit. Each time I hope it will be different. Each time I lose a little of myself as the bitter fruit blossoms. Now that fruit will flower in you and in all your people. I do not want it to happen. I want anything else. But the choice is not mine. Why didn't you stop me? I tasted blood on my long tongue. Why would you let me do this? She blinked sadly at me. She had been trying. I hadn't listened. You never said a thing to me, I snarled. Not once. You never told me I was doing wrong. At least Clarity sends me dreams. The exobody and the eel. At least it shows me what I can become. You think Clarity sent those dreams? Why would it speak to you when you are dead and furthest from its influence? Liar, I howled. You never did a thing to help me. Not when my son died, not when my granddaughter fell ill. I had to do it all myself. You never even spoke. The best voices, she said, with infinite grief and unending hope, never let themselves be heard at all. The lesson is worth teaching again and again. The choice is never mine. It is always yours. Clovis chose, based on his own ego and desire to have more, to enslave himself to the Witness and potentially even slave the rest of humanity. The Traveler will not force anything upon anyone. They all have free will. And that is the difference between the Traveler and the Witness. There is no free will with the Witness. Thank you all so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment, and subscribe. And a special thank you to my Best Muffin and Above members, Prince Mav, Son of Mitch, and Pulse. And remember, hunters never die.
Hunters never die. Hunters never die. No, hunters never die. Hunters never die. No, hunters never die.